Tonight, we invite you to step into the bustling streets of America in 1920. The year was 1920. The Great War had ended. The world was weary, yet restless. America was buzzing with change. Cities roared with noise and light. Jazz music floated through the air. It was wild and alive and new. It spilled from dance halls and speakeasies, mingling with the fumes of automobiles that rattled over cobblestones, startling passing horses with their horns. The old and the new collided here every day. Electric lights glowed in shop windows, beckoning with promises of the latest fashions or the finest chocolates. Day stretched deep into night. There was so much to see, so much to hear, so much to experience. America felt young and impatient. And yet tonight, let us slow down. Before we begin our tale, settle yourself. Adjust your pillow, pull your blanket close, and let your mind wander back in time. Imagine the soft glow of a lamp on a nearby table, casting shadows on the wall. Picture the faint hum of the city outside, a lullaby for the evening. Now listen closely as we begin our story in a crowded corner of New York City. There, in a small tenement building nestled between towering giants of brick and steel, lived a boy. His name was Samuel. He was 9 years old. He was quiet, thoughtful, and curious. His room was small, but it was his sanctuary. As dusk painted the sky with hues of purple and orange, Samuel would climb onto a narrow windowsill. The glass was always cold under his hand, yet it never deterred him. Outside, the city pulsed with life. The rumble of traffic, the distant strains of a violin, the laughter of children playing hopscotch on the sidewalk. These were the sounds that filled his young ears. Tonight, however, the city symphony was particularly enchanting. As Samuel sat there, he heard footsteps on the stairwell, each step echoing in the hollow space. He heard laughter from the street below, carrying on the breeze like a child's song. Sometimes, if he strained his ears, he could hear faint radio crackles transmitting voices and music from distant lands. Voices drifted through half-open doors, speaking in different languages, telling stories in hushed tones. All these sounds wove together to form a rich tapestry of city life that never failed to captivate Samuel's young imagination. He loved to close his eyes and let the city's melody wash over him, making him feel like he was a part of something bigger than himself. It felt like magic to him. But life was not all magic and wonder for Samuel. He knew his share of troubles. He lived in a crowded tenement building. The walls were as thin as paper, so every cough, every argument, and every baby's cry echoed through the rooms. Privacy was almost impossible. In those close quarters, lives intertwined. He knew his neighbors well, Mrs. Rodriguez, who always hummed while she polished floors, Mr. Henderson, who played his violin until late at night, and the O'Malley family with their endless games of checkers and dominoes. They were more than just names on a floor plan. They were characters in the grand play of city life. One day, the Johnsons from apartment 3B were arguing again. Their voices, sharp as shards of glass, cut through the thin walls and seeped into Samuel's room. Their fights were frequent visitors, uninvited guests that nobody wanted but always showed up. He wished they'd keep their arguments to themselves, but that was just how things were in the tenement. Life was a mixture of joys and struggles, hopes and heartaches. Samuel was wise beyond his years, understanding that life wasn't always fair. He had seen hardship etched on his parents' faces and felt the weight of responsibility settle on his small shoulders. Yet, even in the darkest of times, he held on to hope, a flickering flame that refused to be extinguished. He dreamed of a day when things would be better, when the sun shone brighter in his room, when laughter replaced the constant arguments in the hallway, and when his worn-out shoes would be a thing of the past. Every night before bed, Samuel would sit on his windowsill and gaze at the twinkling stars. Up there, beyond the tall buildings and the noisy streets, he saw a world full of possibilities, a world where dreams took flight and wishes came true. He dreamed of wide streets lined with shiny cars, of grand theaters with golden curtains and red carpets, of a world where people danced to the rhythm of happiness. These dreams were his solace, his escape from the harsh realities of his everyday life. In them, he was someone else, someone who didn't have to worry about the next meal or where he would sleep tonight. Those dreams sustained him, reminding him that somewhere out there, beyond the confines of his small room, there was hope, a promise of something better waiting just around the corner. Despite his tender age, Samuel understood the power of dreams. He knew that as long as you had a dream to hold on to, no matter how dark things got, there was always a glimmer of light somewhere, a guiding star to lead you through the shadows. That evening, the wind slipped through the broken frame of his window, carrying the chill of a January night. Samuel pulled his blanket tighter around his small frame, seeking refuge from the biting cold. As he huddled there, he watched the lights across the street flicker softly, painting the walls of the opposite building with hues of amber and crimson. The rhythmic hum of the city seemed to intensify, a constant reminder of the bustling life that thrived even in the darkness. In the silence of his room, the faint sounds of the city became his only company. The distant rumble of a passing automobile, the echo of footsteps on the pavement, the gentle sway of trees lining the street, all these sounds created a symphony that resonated within the four walls of his room. Each sound told a story, each one a fragment of a life that was unfolding just beyond his window. Samuel gazed out into the night, his young mind weaving tales around the shadows cast by the street lamps. He imagined the people who filled the streets, each with their own stories, their own dreams, and their own sorrows. He saw mothers hurrying home, their children in tow, their voices echoing with the day's adventures. He saw young couples strolling hand in hand, their laughter mingling with the music spilling out from open doorways. He saw weary workers making their way home, their steps heavy with the day's toil. In his imagination, the city came alive with 1,000 stories, all interconnected in the grand narrative of urban life. As the hours passed, the city's symphony continued its timeless performance. The hum of activity gradually faded, replaced by a hush that spoke of a city preparing for rest. The distant strains of a violin drifted through the night, mingling with the soft murmur of crickets. The scent of freshly cut grass and blooming flowers seemed to permeate the air, creating a sense of tranquility that belied the city's usual cacophony. The stars twinkled above, casting their soft light upon the sleeping city. For a moment, peace descended upon the bustling streets, a momentary pause before the dawn would break and the city's vibrant pulse would start anew. Samuel turned away from the window, his gaze now fixed on the worn fabric of his blanket. His eyelids grew heavy, and the events of the day, the laughter, the chores, the lessons, all swam before his eyes. The city's symphony, which had been his companion for so long, was now fading into the background. The rhythmic hum of the city was lulling him to sleep, wrapping him in its comforting embrace. As the final notes of the city's evening melody drifted into his room, Samuel succumbed to the gentle embrace of sleep. He drifted off, not to the sounds of roaring traffic or distant sirens, but to the quiet hum of the city at rest. The city, which had been his playground during the day, had now become his lullaby. In his dreams, Samuel found himself exploring the city once more, but this time it was bathed in the soft glow of twilight. The buildings wore a new charm, the streets were less crowded, and the sounds of the city had a soothing melody. He walked along the familiar streets, each turn revealing a new surprise. The bakery on the corner had its lights turned low, leaving only the neon sign illuminating the rows of bread. The music from the jazz club was softer now, inviting him to a world of gentle tunes and soft laughter. Even the distant sirens seemed to whisper rather than blare, creating a harmony in the twilight symphony. As he continued his nocturnal journey, he realized that the city at night was a place of enchantment. It was a world where the ordinary became magical, where the hustle and bustle gave way to a peaceful charm. The city at night was a place of dreams, a reflection of the hopes and aspirations that filled its streets during the day. And so Samuel walked on, enveloped in the beauty of the city at twilight, his heart filled with a sense of wonder that only a child can possess. And as the night deepened, the city's embrace became his lullaby, carrying him to a realm where imagination knew no bounds. In 1920, with jazz in the air and hope in his heart, Samuel drifted into dreams of tomorrow. And so ends our journey tonight. If you enjoyed this episode, remember to subscribe so you never miss an adventure. Tap the like button, leave us a comment, and tell us where you're listening from. Perhaps you're in New York itself, where the story unfolded. Or maybe you're far across the ocean, listening to the echoes of the city that never sleeps. Wherever you are, this story is for you. The night had grown quiet after the city's hum faded into the distance. Inside the narrow apartment, Samuel's world felt smaller, but safer. Outside, New York City roared with the energy of millions. But here, tucked away on the fourth floor of a building, life was quieter, almost hushed. This wasn't just any apartment. It was Samuel's home, and its four walls held all the stories of his life. The building was tall, one of many crowded tenements that lined the streets of New York. Its worn brick exterior told tales of countless residents who had come and gone. Dozens of families lived within its belly, each with their own hopes and struggles. As Samuel pressed his ear against the thin wooden wall, he could hear the echoes of their lives. The murmur of voices drifted through, carried on the currents of everyday life. Laughter from a nearby room, the rumble of a cough, the distant cries of a baby, the clatter of dishes from an unseen table. Every sound traveled through these walls, weaving together the tapestry of their lives. Privacy was a rare luxury here. The building was old, its rooms small and close together. Walls were thin, windows were few, and the air itself seemed to carry whispers from one room to another. Yet somehow, within the symphony of the city, Samuel had learned to find peace. From his small window, he could see the sky, a sliver of blue above the rooftops. Here, in this tiny haven, surrounded by the comforting sounds of his neighbors, Samuel had learned the rhythm of life. He knew the gentle creak of the floorboards beneath his feet. He knew the whisper of the wind through the cracks in the window frames. He knew the symphony of the city outside, the rumble of passing carriages, the distant wail of a police siren, the murmur of conversations on the street below. These sounds were the soundtrack of his childhood, and he knew them intimately. In this small apartment, life unfolded like a melody. Each room resonated with its own tune. One room served as the kitchen, their place for meals and warmth. In the heart of winter, when the cold seeped through the cracks in the walls, they huddled around their small coal stove. The room was small, with bare wooden floors and walls that had seen better days. But it was here that life unfolded. Here they shared stories, laughter, and dreams over simple meals. The other was for sleeping, a patchwork of blankets and beds. At night, as the city slept, Samuel and his family would retreat to their bedrooms. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. The room was cozy, filled with the scent of sleep and dreams. His bed was a simple affair, a thin mattress on the floor, tucked in with blankets and quilts. But to Samuel, it was a kingdom of comfort. In the corner stood a small coal stove, their only heat in winter. It glowed weakly, struggling at times to keep the biting cold at bay. Beside it hung a black kettle, chipped from years of use. When the kettle sang on the stove, it meant that soup was ready, and the aroma of simmering vegetables filled the room with warmth and comfort. The sound of the kettle was a lullaby to Samuel. It meant nourishment, it meant family, it meant home. The table was old, its surface scratched by countless meals. Some nights they ate only bread and water, but other nights there was cabbage stew. It wasn't much, but it was thin and filling, perfect for a cold evening. The stew bubbled in the chipped enamel pot, its steam dancing in the dim lamplight. The scent of simmering cabbage and potatoes clung to the room long after dinner. Shoes and coats hung neatly on nails by the door. They weren't much to look at, but they were theirs. His father had a worn leather jacket, his mother a shawl with a missing button. Samuel had a cap that was too big for him. But on cold days they bundled up, creating a shield against the winter chill. They owned few clothes, but cared for them carefully. A faded rug stretched across the wooden floor, its colors muted with age. Each board beneath it groaned underfoot, a testament to countless steps taken over the years. The walls were pale, their paint peeling in corners. Time had left its marks here, a reminder that even in the heart of bustling New York, life could be hard and simple. But when the lamp was lit, the whole place felt alive. A single oil lamp sat on the table, glowing softly, casting flickering shadows that danced along the walls. When the lamp was lit, it pushed back the darkness and brought warmth to their faces. Its glow painted the worn walls in shades of orange and gold, making the room feel larger, making it feel hopeful. At night, the shadows seemed to dance. They twisted and turned, becoming playful creatures in Samuel's imagination. He would watch them, mesmerized, as he drifted towards sleep. Beside the lamp, his mother often mended clothes by hand. Her fingers moved quickly, steady from years of practice. The sound of her needle was like a quiet rhythm in the room, a soothing melody that lulled him into calmness. Sometimes she hummed a lullaby while she worked, her voice soft and sweet like honey. Those songs always made Samuel feel safe and loved. His father often came home late from the docks, his face weathered by the sun and salt spray of the sea. The smell of salt water and wood clung to his clothes. He looked tired, his shoulders slumped, but he always had a smile for Samuel. "How are you, my boy?" he would ask, his voice hoarse but kind. Even when his hands were rough from work, he would gently stroke Samuel's hair. "Tomorrow will be better," he often whispered, his words carrying the promise of a brighter day. And Samuel believed him every time. His older brother also returned late, carrying heavy crates in exchange for coins. His hands were rough, his clothes were dusty, but his eyes twinkled with kindness. Sometimes he saved a sweet for Samuel, wrapped in paper and tied with string. It wasn't much, but to Samuel it was a treasure. Together, their small earnings kept the family alive. They had little, but they shared everything. Their love was the thread that wove their lives together, holding them close in the face of hardship. Even in hardship, they found ways to laugh. Their voices echoed through the apartment, chasing away the shadows of their struggles. Their laughter mingled with the sounds of the city, creating a harmony of joy and resilience. Outside, the city roared with change and energy, but inside life was quiet, fragile and close. And the walls of their apartment may have been thin, but their love was strong. Sometimes a neighbor's radio carried through the thin walls, the crackle of jazz and news filling their ears. The music spilled into their lives, bringing a touch of the outside world to their haven. The radio was a portal, transporting them to smoky jazz clubs or lively town squares, all from the comfort of their small apartment. Samuel pressed his head to the wall to listen. He closed his eyes, letting the music paint pictures in his mind. He imagined walking down bustling streets, the sound of saxophone filling the air. He saw dancers swirling, couples laughing, all in a world far from their cramped apartment. The songs made the apartment feel larger than it was. They carried him far beyond their narrow street, whispering tales of adventure and excitement. Samuel often dreamed of a future with more space. He dreamed of a home where the walls didn't echo with the voices of neighbors, where a table overflowed with food, not just bread and cabbage, where windows opened to skies, not just brick walls. But for now, dreams were enough. He snuggled deeper into his blankets, listening to the music weave its magic around him. The closeness of his family gave him comfort, his mother's soft hand on his shoulder, his father's quiet stories told when he had strength, his brother's laughter, even after long days of work. Together they made this small place feel alive. The apartment might have been cramped, the rooms small and the walls thin, but in its embrace, Samuel felt loved. The worn floorboards whispered tales of generations past. The chipped furniture bore witness to their laughter and struggles. The faint sounds from neighboring rooms were not intrusions, but reminders that they were part of a larger community. The walls were old, their surface etched with the passage of time, but within those walls lived care, hope, and love. And to Samuel, those things mattered most of all. As the oil lamp flickered lower and the room grew quiet, Samuel closed his eyes, content. Wrapped in the warmth of his family and the flickering glow of the lamp, he dreamed again of a brighter tomorrow. As the shadows stretched long in the tenement apartment, 8-year-old Samuel snuggled deeper under his blankets. Outside, the sounds of New York City echoed up the fire escape, mingling with the rhythmic tick-tock of the old clock on the dresser. But here in this small room, tucked away from the urban symphony, Samuel's eyelids grew heavy. Another day was ending. But before sleep embraced him, he watched his mother busy about their tiny home. She hummed a tuneless song as she folded clothes, her silhouette outlined by the lamplight. Her back, stooped from years of hard work, was a testament to the silent strength she possessed. The worn fabric of the dresses and shirts she handled spoke of countless washings, each crease telling a tale of someone else's life. Laundry was her trade, her way of providing for her family in a city that seemed determined to swallow them whole. Every Monday, she took the long walk to the homes of wealthier families, carrying with her the precious liquid gold, water heated in their very own copper kettle. She scrubbed and she sang as she worked, her voice a comforting sound in the cavernous rooms, filled with the pungent aroma of soap and stale chamber pots. When the clothes were clean, she pressed them carefully, dreaming of a time when her own children wouldn't have to wear hand-me-downs. Now, as the evening deepened, she returned home, her arms laden with the freshly laundered garments. She hung them across the room on the makeshift clothesline, their dampness a soothing mist in the air. For Samuel, it was a familiar sight, one that had become part of the backdrop of his life. He watched her move with a grace born of necessity, her steps light despite the weight of her load. But in the cramped tenement room, the clothes couldn't dry completely. Samuel knew that tomorrow they would be packed up again, ready to take on the grime and dirt of another week. Each garment hung heavy with stories, not just of the families they had belonged to, but of the lives they had touched, of the laughter and tears absorbed by the fabric. Someday, he thought, I will buy my mama new clothes, ones she can keep clean and fresh, not just for others. As the evening deepened, the smell of dinner, a simple stew, thickened with potatoes and carrots, filled the air. It wasn't much, but it was everything to them. His father, a giant of a man with hands like bear paws, sat heavily at the table. He told stories of the docks, of the ships and the crates, and of the fights and camaraderie among the men who unloaded them. He didn't talk much about his work, but when he did, his voice was a mix of weariness and pride. Samuel's older brother Michael sat quietly, lost in his thoughts. The two of them shared a knowing look. They both understood the silence that had fallen over their house in recent weeks, the absence of his father's usual boisterous tales. The truth was etched into the lines on their father's face, the truth that the harbour, once a source of livelihood, had become a dangerous place for them. The owners had turned to harder, more desperate measures to cut costs, leaving men injured or out of work. Michael, like his father before him, worked at the docks, his young shoulders burdened by responsibilities he shouldn't have to carry. He handled crates heavier than he was, his small frame straining under the weight. Sometimes he came home with cuts on his hands, the salt water of the harbour stinging his wounds. The work was backbreaking, the pay barely enough to fill their bellies. But still, as he entered the apartment, he managed to smile for Samuel. He shared a piece of bread with him, the crusty edges softened by the stew they ate for dinner. His father looked at him with pride, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Work at the harbour was brutal. The men shouted and cursed as they lifted heavy barrels and crates, their muscles straining under the strain. The hours were endless and the pay was meagre. The sea clung to everything, to the ropes, to the wood, and eventually to the men themselves. The salt air dried their skin, and their bones ached from the constant labor. But they worked on, driven by the need to survive in a city that offered little mercy. At night, they smelled of the sea and of sweat. Their clothes, thick with salt, chafed against their skin. By the time they reached home, their bodies sagged with exhaustion. They walked slowly, their steps heavy with fatigue. In the dim lamplight, their faces were etched with weariness. The grime of the city clung to them, a dark reminder of the battles they fought each day. The rhythm of their lives was dictated by the rising and setting of the sun, by the demands of the city and the needs of their family. Every day was a struggle, every hour a test of endurance. The city never waited for the weak. It moved at its own pace, indifferent to their weariness. But they kept going, driven by the silent strength that bound them together. In their eyes, Samuel saw the reflection of the setting sun, the fading light of a day that had been long and hard. They ate their dinner in silence, the clink of spoons against bowls echoing in the small room. Afterward, his father went to his corner, the worn mattress on the floor his only bed. He slept heavily, his breathing slow and deep. There were lines on his forehead now, new ones that hadn't been there before. Samuel knew that these lines were maps of worry, tracing paths of concern for his family. Despite the shadows that had crept into their lives, there were moments of laughter, small flickers of joy in the darkness. One evening, after his father had gone to his rest, Michael brought home a small sweet, its brown paper wrapper crinkled in his hand. He tore it open slowly, revealing a sticky toffee delight. Samuel watched, mesmerized, as his brother broke off a piece and held it out to him. The taste of it was like caramel sunshine on their tongues, a brief escape from the greyness of their lives. And in that moment, the tenement walls seemed to fade away, replaced by the imagined towers of sugar and spice. As the city roared outside, Samuel and Michael sat close, sharing their sweet, their laughter, echoing softly in the dusk. It was a small joy, a brief respite, but it was real. For a boy, the world can feel heavy at times. The weight of his parents' tired eyes, the stoop of his father's shoulders, the blisters on his brother's hands, all of it was a silent burden. He understood more than anyone else the fragility of their lives, how a missed day of work could mean an empty table, how an injury could mean hunger, perhaps something worse. The city did not wait for the weak. It moved fast, and only the strong survived. Yet somehow, in the midst of it all, there was love. Their love for each other wove a tapestry of strength, holding them together through the hardships. They laughed together when they could, shared every bite no matter how small, leaned on each other when the days grew heavy. In that closeness, Samuel found hope, a flicker in the darkness that refused to be extinguished. The sounds of the city were a constant presence, the rumble of traffic, the distant strains of music. But inside their apartment, another rhythm beat, the rhythm of survival, the rhythm of care, the rhythm of family. One day, Samuel sat on the faded rug, watching his mother as she mended a shirt. His tiny fingers traced patterns on the worn fabric, his mind adrift in the city's bustle. The tenement walls seemed to melt away, revealing the bustling streets beyond. He saw horse-drawn carts and street vendors, the laughter of children at play, the murmur of people going about their lives. New York in 1920 was a city of extremes, a place where fortunes were made and broken, where dreams soared and crashed, where the melody of jazz mingled with the harsh realities of poverty. Samuel wanted to explore it all, to experience the magic and the mayhem, to understand the hopes and heartaches that played out on its streets. He looked at his mother's weathered hands, her needle flashing like a silver star against the worn fabric. She was strong, he thought, stronger than the city's hardships, more resilient than the threads she mended. And in her quiet strength he found solace. As the years passed, Samuel grew, yet he carried the images of his family in his heart. The tiredness in his father's eyes, the stoop in his shoulders, the calluses on his hands. They became part of a story he told himself each day, a story of work, of hunger, of love, of America in 1920, a land of promise and peril. Each day was a lesson, each day brought new challenges. And each night, as he lay in his worn bed, he whispered his dreams to the city, dreams of helping his family, of lifting the burdens from their shoulders, of bringing a smile to his mother's lips, of easing the lines on his father's brow, of healing the cuts on his brother's hands. These dreams fueled his spirit, driving him forward with a determination that belied his years. Because for Samuel, hope was stronger than hardship. The tenement walls might have been narrow and the city harsh, but within those four walls, he learned the most important lessons of all: love, resilience, and the quiet strength that comes from facing adversity with a brave heart. The first light of morning slipped through the thin curtains, painting stripes across the worn wooden floorboards. The tenement slowly woke with the sound of footsteps and voices whispering in the dim light. From the street below came the rumble of carts and automobiles stirring to life, mixing with the cries of vendors and the distant clang of a factory bell. In a small two-room apartment bathed in weak sunlight, Samuel stirred beneath his blanket, pulling himself away from dreams of adventure. The air was still cold from the night before, but a faint warmth began to creep from beneath his mother's skirt as she moved about the kitchen. He watched her work, her silhouette outlined by the weak light spilling in from the street. The faint smell of boiling oatmeal filled the room, mingling with the yeasty aroma of bread baking in the oven downstairs. Beside it, the kettle hissed softly on the coal stove, its spout spitting tiny jets of steam into the air. It curled upward, fogging the cracked window glass and momentarily obscuring the grey sky beyond. His mother's hands moved quickly, practiced from years of routine. She measured out grains into a chipped bowl with one hand, while her other stirred the pot with a wooden spoon. Her husband, Samuel Sr., rose slowly from his chair, his back stiff from a night spent sleeping on the docks. He watched his wife work, her movements a familiar comfort in the small space. The silence was comfortable, broken only by the gurgling of the kettle and the rhythmic scraping of the spoon against the pot. It had been their song for so many years now. When the oatmeal was ready, his mother set out bowls, each chipped but carefully kept. Their pattern worn smooth by countless meals, 2 for herself, 1 for Samuel, and a larger one for her husband. As he poured the steaming gruel into his bowl, his son Samuel slid off the stool and joined him at the table. His father splashed cold water on his face from a tin basin, drawing more steam from the oatmeal and sending wisps of it floating toward the ceiling. The water was icy, drawn from the shared pump downstairs, a communal source that never quite warmed in the biting winter months. It woke him, but it also reminded him of the day ahead. Across the room, his eldest son dressed quickly, tying his coat over his shirt. He was already thinking of the shop, the feel of wood beneath his hands, the scent of sawdust and varnish. In the corner, he laced up his worn boots with frayed laces, the leather softened by years of use. His hands were rough, marked by crates and splinters. Samuel watched his father. From behind the worn rim of his bowl, he saw calluses and scars, a map of a life lived hard but honestly. The younger, Samuel, blew on the steam rising from his bowl, watching it dissipate into the air. The oatmeal was thin but warm, and it filled his stomach. He looked up to see his father watching him. For a moment, there was an unspoken understanding between them, a bond forged in the daily grind of life. Finally, his father spoke, his voice gruff with sleep and the salt of the sea. "Work hard, stay strong," he said quietly, his gaze unwavering. "No matter what comes, hold fast." It was advice given and received every morning, a ritual as ingrained as the sunrise. Samuel nodded, though his day was lighter than theirs. His school sat only a few streets away, a place where hard work and learning were supposed to build a better future. When he finished his bowl of oatmeal, his mother took it and rinsed it in the basin, her hands moving efficiently, already thinking of the day's laundry. Clothes would be collected soon, brought in baskets from wealthier homes along with stacks of linens and towels. There would be shirts with oil stains and socks with holes, each telling a story of a life lived. Samuel dried his bowl and put it back on the shelf, joining his mother by the window as she sorted through the piles of fabric. His father stood, buttoning his worn coat. He placed his cap on his head and kissed Samuel's mother on the cheek, her hands lingering on his arm for a moment before he stepped into the hall. "Take care, Mary. Be safe, Samuel." He called over his shoulder as he disappeared into the maze of hallways and stairways. "You too," she answered, her voice soft yet steady. The apartment grew quieter without them. Only the sound of the coal stove remained, crackling softly like an old friend. Samuel turned away from the window, watching the flickering flames. As the minutes passed, the muted sounds of the city slowly filled their small apartment, seeping in through cracks in the walls and doors left ajar. The rhythmic clatter of carts on cobblestone streets, the distant blast of a factory whistle, the muffled laughter of children at play. It was a constant backdrop, a city symphony that never ceased. His mother turned to him, her face lined with fatigue, yet her eyes bright with determination. "Eat well, Sam. You'll need your strength too." Her words were a gentle reminder, a testament to the endurance that had become their way of life. He nodded, though his day was lighter than theirs. His school sat only a few streets away, a place where hard work and learning were supposed to build a better future. But even there, the shadow of the city's struggles lingered. He slipped into his patched coat, a size too big, its pockets worn thin from countless journeys. The coat had belonged to his brother, a hand-me-down treasure that offered a sliver of warmth against the winter chill. His shoes were scuffed, but still held together, each step a testament to their resilience. His mother brushed his hair with her fingers, her touch gentle yet firm, like the bread she kneaded every day. "Learn something new today," she told him softly, tucking a stray strand behind his ear. "Be good. Don't stay out too late." He promised he would. Then he stepped toward the door, book in hand, the worn cover offering a promise of adventure and escape. Outside, the hallway smelled faintly of coal smoke and cabbage, a familiar blend that had become part of their daily lives. Other children hurried past, their voices echoing on the stairs, their laughter ringing with the innocence of youth. The building felt alive, buzzing with the morning routine of families waking, of dreams taking flight, and hopes being pinned onto aprons and overalls. Each footstep, each whisper, contributing to a melody as old as the tenement itself. Samuel descended the stairs slowly, careful not to trip, the steps groaning beneath his weight. He paused for a moment at the doorway, taking in the sights and sounds of a city just waking up. The street outside was already full of life, carts rattling, cars honking, horses snorted in the cold, their breath misting in the air. Newspapers flapped in the wind from a vendor's stand, their headlines shouting news from distant lands. Children ran past, clutching books under their arms, their laughter echoing in the narrow street. Samuel tightened his coat and stepped into the day. Behind him, his mother stood in the window, waving faintly, her figure framed by the soft glow of the rising sun. He raised his hand in return, a small smile on his face. The city's noise grew louder as he walked, the distant pulse of industry throbbing in his ears. Factories loomed in the distance, their smokestacks spewing plumes of grey into the pale sky, each puff marking the beginning of another workday. Workers hurried past, lunch tins clattering at their sides, their faces grim yet resolute. Samuel blended into the flow of the morning crowd, a small figure dwarfed by the towering buildings and bustling crowds. The air smelled of coal smoke, fresh bread, and wet stone. It was a stark yet comforting blend that had become the backdrop of his life. He clutched his books close, finding solace in their worn covers and dog-eared pages, each crease a testament to his dreams of a brighter tomorrow. Reaching the corner of Elm and Fifth, he stopped for a moment, taking in the sights and sounds of the city he called home. Though poverty had its grip on their lives, there was a certain beauty in the tenacity of the people, the way they rose each day, brushed the dust from their shoulders, and carried on. Here, amidst the clamor and chaos, Samuel found a strange sense of belonging. He saw it in the shared smiles of neighbors, in the calloused hands of artisans, in the hopeful eyes of children clutching books tight. As he continued his walk to school, the weight of his city settled on his young shoulders, a mantle of responsibility tempered by the warmth of community and the promise of education. The city was his classroom now, its streets and buildings whispering tales of struggle and resilience. With each step, Samuel absorbed a little more of its lessons, preparing himself not just for exams, but for life. And as he walked, he dreamed again of a brighter tomorrow. The streets of New York, they're alive. Alive with the honk of horns and the rumble of wheels, with the shouts of vendors and the clatter of traffic. Come spend a day with us as we bring you the sights and sounds of the Big Apple in the roaring 20s. The streets outside the tenement were already alive with noise. Samuel stood at the top of the stairs, peering out over the sidewalk. He hesitated for a moment, taking a deep breath before stepping out into the bustling street. Clutching his well-worn schoolbook tight, he started down the stairs, careful not to fall or drop his prized possession. Around him, the city stirred awake. The cobblestones glistened faintly with last night's rain, reflecting the soft glow of nearby shop windows. The buildings on either side of the street towered over him, their brick facades adorned with posters advertising everything from jazz clubs and Nickelodeons to cures for coughs and hair tonics. As Samuel emerged onto the sidewalk, he found himself surrounded by a sea of faces. People hurried past him, their eyes fixed ahead. They brushed against him, and he instinctively flinched, half expecting to be jostled or shoved. But somehow in this throng of humanity there was a strange order. People flowed around him like water, always busy, always moving. He stood on the corner, taking in the sounds that enveloped him. Around him, the city buzzed like a restless machine. Automobiles rattled past, their engines coughing smoke into the air, forcing him to pull his coat tighter against the fumes. The drivers leaned out of their open-topped cars, shouting to be heard above the din. Their horns blared angrily when others got in their way. But for Samuel, it was just another Tuesday morning. He'd been born and raised here in the heart of New York City and knew its streets like the back of his hand. There was a time when the sounds had bothered him, but now they were just a constant presence. It was almost as if he could hear the city breathing, pulsing with life, energy and power. Lumbering horses still pulled carts along the road, their hooves striking the stones and making the buildings around him seem to tremble. Streetcars clanged overhead, swaying gently as they climbed the steep hills. And along the route, their bells jangled impatiently, announcing their approach. The clash of car horns and the snort of horses mingled with the shout of vendors pushing their way through the crowds. From his vantage point on the corner, Samuel watched a streetcar arrive, disgorging a rush of passengers who hurried away, eager to reach their destinations. A moment later, another car pulled up, and more people poured out onto the pavement. The steady stream of arrivals gave Samuel an idea of how many people lived in this city, packed tightly together in these tenements, all with places to be and things to do. Each face was different, some smiling, some grim, some lost in thought. Some were old and lined, others young and hopeful. All were touched by the grime of the city, all were touched by its energy. Down the street, a vendor called out, "Bread! Fresh bread!" His voice hoarse from calling out all day long. His wooden cart creaked under the weight of loaves, each wrapped in paper and tied with string. A little further on, another vendor attracted attention with his wares of fruit. "Get your fruit here, apples, oranges and bananas." His stall overflowed with brightly colored produce, piled high and displayed temptingly to passers-by. The smell of roasted nuts drifted through the crowd, mingling with the aroma of frying bread and roasting coffee. In the distance, the sound of a piano floated from an open window, accompanied by a man singing a bluesy tune. From somewhere above, a tinny radio set played a lively tune, its music drifting down from an open window. A woman in a long black coat paused on the opposite sidewalk and tapped her foot to the rhythm. She wore a cloche hat pulled low over her ears, and her gloved hands swung loosely at her sides. Beside her, a man in a dark suit hurried along, his briefcase banging against his knees. His sharp features and severe expression betrayed his urgency. Samuel recognized the popular brand of his suit and knew the man was probably headed uptown. To meet with important clients, he wondered what they would have for lunch, perhaps oysters, Rockefeller, or chicken a la king. He saw children skipping beside their parents, clutching books and lunch tins. A little girl in a bright red coat ran ahead, chasing a stray dog. Her laughter echoed across the street. Samuel smiled, remembering a time when he too had been carefree. The screech of a trolley car brought Samuel back to the present. A line of cars approached, their bells ringing loudly. One screeched to a halt at the corner, sending a spray of pebbles flying. Its bell rang out sharply, echoing down the street. Samuel stepped back onto the pavement to let the passengers disembark. Some were businessmen in a hurry, others were young couples holding hands. A few were street vendors returning home after a long day. Their coats flapped in the wind as they jumped off the car and hurried away. The streetlight still glowed faintly in the morning haze. Its light glinted off a nearby brass fire hydrant. Nearby, a man in a long coat paused to adjust his hat. He was arguing with a newspaper boy who thrust a folded paper into his hands. The man shook his head, but the boy stood firm, insisting the paper was free. Finally, the man relented and took the paper, muttering as he did so. Samuel glanced at the boy and realized he was about to make a sale. He couldn't afford to buy a paper today, but if he asked nicely, maybe he could get one for free. Newsboys were everywhere, darting between people, waving their papers. Their high voices shouted the morning headlines. Sacco and Vanzetti case goes to Supreme Court. Volstead Act defies the 14th Amendment. Jazz singer Helen Kane packs them in at the Cotton Club. Samuel looked at the pictures printed on the front page, but the words meant nothing to him. As the boys scattered, a woman hurried past, shielding her eyes from the glare of a shop window. She wore a long coat and a stylish hat pulled low over her face. A man in a dark suit followed close behind, talking in hushed tones. They stopped before a wall covered in posters. Showy lettering announced the Roxy Theatre, promising a spectacular house of comedy and music. A picture of a handsome leading man smiled down at them, his arm draped casually around the shoulder of a beautiful woman. Below, in smaller print, were the names of the stars of the show. Samuel stopped to look. The ornate designs and vivid colors captivated him, transporting him to a world of glamour and excitement. He imagined sitting in a plush seat, listening to music and watching wonders unfold before his eyes. A passing cart jolted him back to reality. Wheels splashed muddy water onto the street, kicking up dirt and grime. Samuel stepped aside, allowing the cart to pass. His shoes were damp, but he didn't bother to wipe them off. Above him, on the fire escape, a woman hung out a shirt to dry. Laundry fluttered in the breeze. Long lines stretched between the tall buildings. White sheets swayed like flags. He looked up at the row of tenement buildings lining the street. Each window was a portal to a different world. Each balcony was a stage where lives unfolded. He wondered who lived behind those walls, what hopes and dreams they harbored, what struggles they faced. He spotted two children leaning out from an open window, their faces pressed against the glass, watching the street below. A man sat on a railing, puffing lazily on a cigarette. A woman stood on another fire escape, shaking out a blanket. Dust sprinkled down below. Life pressed close, stacked high in these tenements. The air was thick, coal, bread, perfume and horses, a potent mix of smells that clung to his clothes and hair. It was harsh, but also strangely alive. On the corner, street musicians had begun to play. A saxophone sent warm notes floating into the air, blending with the surrounding sounds. The melody was slow and mournful, yet hopeful. The rhythm was infectious, drawing people closer. Soon a small crowd had gathered, clapping hands to the beat. Children stopped to listen, mesmerized by the music. An old man leaned heavily on his cane, tapping his foot. A young couple swayed, lost in their own world. Samuel paused, swaying gently with the sound. Music made the city's chaos feel lighter, its troubles easier to bear. For a moment, there was only the music, only the people, and the shared experience of it all. Suddenly, a policeman blew his whistle sharply, sending birds scattering into the sky. A nearby driver slammed on his brakes, cursing under his breath. The noise swelled again, horns, hooves, whistles, voices, all clamoring for attention. It was a cacophony of sound, yet somehow it was harmonious. To Samuel, it was the city's song. He walked on, eyes wide with wonder, taking it all in. Around him, tall buildings rose like giants, their windows glittering with pale morning light. Shop signs swung gently in the wind, shoes, hats, chocolates, all promised to those who could afford them. The letters on the signs gleamed, daring him to dream. He longed to step inside, to be transported to a world of luxury and ease, but kept moving. A bakery door opened suddenly beside him. Warm air rushed out, carrying the smell of sweet rolls and brewing coffee. His stomach rumbled, but he pressed forward, unable to stop even if he wanted to. In the distance, a church bell began to toll. Its deep sound blended with the city's noise, creating a strange counterpoint to the busy street. Samuel adjusted the book under his arm, adjusting to the weight of it. The sidewalk was crowded. Feet hurried in every direction, rushing to be somewhere else, doing something else. A trolley line clanged overhead. Sparks crackled faintly as the wires sang. Children ran after it, laughing at the sparks. A man tipped his hat politely to a passing woman. Her lips curved into a smile, and he returned it. Everywhere Samuel looked, life moved quickly. Every moment was full of motion and change. He felt small among it all, but also part of it. The city was rough, but it held endless promise. Every corner whispered of opportunity. Every passerby carried a story waiting to be told. The rhythm of New York pulsed through his chest, keeping time with his own heartbeat. Even its noise seemed like music. Even its chaos felt like alive with hope. Samuel stepped carefully around a puddle. Water reflected the glow of nearby shop windows. For a moment, it looked. The city's heartbeat grew louder as Samuel neared the factory district. Tall chimneys poured smoke into the sky, darkening the heavens above the brick and steel giants. Their tops scraped the clouds as if trying to escape the grime and din of the city below. He could smell coal and iron and oil before he saw the towering gates guarded by men in green coats. This was the place where his father disappeared each morning. And today, Samuel was going to see what happened next. The air grew thick with soot as he entered the factory gates. Workers hurried through, their lunch tins rattling in their hands, their boots stamping the cobblestones in a steady rhythm. The sound was like a drumbeat of survival. Each step a man took, each breath he breathed, was a measure of his life in this place. Samuel's father often walked here at dawn. His boots echoed on the cobbles just like these men. The docks were his world, but sometimes he labored in factories too. When the work was scarce on the water, his strong arms would take him from loading crates to hauling steel, from shifting coal to operating presses. But this place was more than just a workplace. It was a furnace of lives, forging men and women anew every day. As Samuel reached the heavy iron gates, they swung inward, revealing a world of clamor and industry. He stepped inside and the sound hit him like a wave. Machines clanged and roared, bells rang, whistles screamed, and shouts echoed above the din. The noise was so loud it drowned out thought. All around him, men rushed about, their faces grey with dust. Some wiped their brows with oily rags, their muscles straining beneath their clothes. Others hurried past, their eyes fixed on the tasks ahead. The air thrummed with energy as belts spun, gears turned, hammers struck metal. Sparks flew, furnaces glowed, and the scent of hot metal filled the air. The air trembled with motion. Machines lunged and convulsed, their limbs pumping, pistons pumping, bellies heaving. Men moved quickly, their faces grey with dust. Their clothes were darkened by soot and sweat, and many wore caps pulled low to shield their eyes. In the haze of flying chips, others tied cloth over their mouths to breathe. The floor was slick with oil and grease, reflecting the flickering lamplight hanging overhead. The walls shook each time a press struck down, sending shivers through the very building. Heat rose from furnaces thick and heavy, and the glow of fire lit the shadows in orange. Samuel stood at the entrance, mesmerized by the spectacle. Then he saw a crack in the wall. Peeking through, he saw rows upon rows of machines, each one with a man tending it. Steel beams, tools, and even the carts that held materials were made here. These men made the city's strength. This was the source of its power. In the distance, a man with a torn sleeve held up a piece of cloth to shield himself from sparks. Another man with a missing finger wiped grease off a machine part. They worked hard and fast, taking little rest. Samuel watched a worker bend a piece of metal with practiced hands. Then he saw a young lad, no older than himself, sweeping near the doorway. Their eyes met for a moment, full of quiet understanding. Samuel looked away, his heart aching. He knew that if school didn't keep him here, then work would drag him in one day too. As he walked further into the factory, the sounds and smells enveloped him completely. The air hung heavy with coal dust, making it hard to breathe. A layer of soot covered everything, machines, floors, even the workers' skin. The ceaseless clatter and hiss of machinery filled his ears. Everywhere he looked, men toiled, their bodies bent over their tasks. He saw a burly man with a bushy moustache oiling a chain. His arms were thick as cables, his hands like worn leather. The man paused, wiping his brow with a greasy rag. Next to him, a thinner man with sharp features measured a length of wire precisely. His movements were quick and precise, his eyes sharp and focused. Nearby, a team of men lifted a heavy crate onto a cart. They grunted with effort, their faces red with strain. One man, older and wearier than the rest, directed their movements with a gruff voice. Samuel watched as a young girl, no older than 8, carried a bucket of water between two machines. Her back was straight with determination, her steps sure and steady. She paused to wipe the sweat from her forehead, then resumed her task. On another floor, a group of men huddled around a table covered with blueprints. They spoke in hushed tones, their heads bent in concentration. An engineer, tall and thin with wire-rimmed glasses, pointed to a drawing with a long stick. The others nodded, discussing the plans in low voices. He saw a well-dressed foreman pacing along the rows of machines. He carried a clipboard under his arm and a whistle hung from his neck. He stopped to inspect a machine, then continued on, his footsteps echoing on the metal grating. Everywhere Samuel looked, he saw men and women giving their all. They bent metal, cut wires and hammered gears into shape. Sparks flew, furnaces glowed, and the air hummed with the rhythm of industry. Samuel watched as a young boy no older than 10 climbed onto a platform to retrieve a fallen tool. With surprising agility, he jumped and landed on the ledge, then reached for the object. Another boy, slightly older, stood nearby sweeping up scraps of metal. He paused to watch his friend, a small smile on his face. He noticed a woman seated at a table, sewing a long piece of cloth. Her fingers moved quickly and accurately, her eyes focused on the task at hand. Despite the monotonous nature of her work, she seemed content, occasionally humming a tune. A man stood nearby inspecting the fabric as it emerged from the machine, his brow furrowed in concentration. From a distance, Samuel saw a group of men gathered around a large machine, their faces illuminated by the bright lights. They adjusted dials and levers, their voices raised in discussion. The machine whirred and clanked, its massive arms moving with precision. Close by, a solitary man sat at a desk, poring over a book filled with numbers and figures. He wore glasses and a suit, his demeanor serious and intense. Each person had their role, their purpose. Together they created a symphony of industry. The factory whistle blew, sharp and commanding. Its cry echoed across the streets, drowning out the rhythmic clang of the machines. Suddenly all eyes turned towards the clock. Men and women lined up, punching their time cards. Their faces, streaked with dirt and sweat, showed the toll the work took on them. Samuel saw his father in the line, his shoulders heavy with fatigue. The man glanced at Samuel before stepping inside, disappearing into the maze of machinery and men. The factory doors closed, swallowing his father's form. Outside, Samuel sat on the curb for a moment, hugging his book tightly. The ground vibrated with the factory's roar, each strike of the machine seeming to shake his chest. The din was deafening, leaving a ringing in his ears. The air was thick with coal dust, making it hard to breathe. He watched as men and women filed out, their bodies slumped with exhaustion. Their faces, covered in grime, told stories of hard work and long hours. Many carried tools or parts in their hands, their steps slow and heavy. Some walked with a limp, their bodies bearing the scars of their labor. A few stopped to chat in low voices, exchanging news or gossip before disappearing into the crowd. Their shoulders slumped, their eyes distant. They trudged on, seeking the solace of their homes. Samuel stood, brushing dust from his coat. He walked away from the factory gates. The sound still thundered behind him, but the street ahead carried the voices of children. He followed the sound, walking toward school. Every step carried both relief and guilt. Relief that he was free of the factory's chains. Guilt that his father remained inside them. Still, Samuel walked on, eyes fixed forward. The city was harsh, but it was also full of dreams. Factories roared, but so did hope. And Samuel carried that hope like a flame inside him. One day, he believed things would change, and when they did, no child would have to trade books for machines again. For now, though, he had lessons to learn. Samuel ran to catch up with his friends. They fell into step beside him, their chatter filling the air. The three boys talked about their day, their voices echoing in the twilight. The factory loomed in the distance, a silent giant at dusk. Smoke still poured from its chimneys, staining the twilight sky. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the clouds in hues of orange and purple. The city lights twinkled to life, casting a warm glow on the weathered brick of the factory walls. The rhythmic clang of the machines faded into the night, replaced by the chirping of crickets. Samuel turned back to look at the factory. The dark silhouette stood against the fading light, a reminder of the day's toil. He walked on, joining the throng of people heading home. The city hummed with life, a symphony of noise and movement. Street lamps flickered to life, casting long shadows on the pavement. Samuel's house came into view, a small but sturdy building with a white porch. The windows glowed with the warmth of the evening meal. As he stepped inside, the familiar scent of stew and bread enveloped him. His mother sat at the table, her face etched with the day's labor. His brother sat beside her, his clothes dusty from a day of hauling. In the corner, his sister read a book by the lamplight. The room was filled with the quiet comfort of family. The day's work forgotten for now, Samuel joined his family at the table, the warmth of home enveloping him. The factory would wait till morning, but right now there was only supper and the promise of rest. The shrill ring of the factory bell echoed off the tall buildings as Samuel hurried away from work. His small hands tucked safely inside the big pockets of his patched coat. He'd finished his shift early today and now raced towards school before the evening bell tolled. As he approached, the sound of the factory faded into the background. The grand building loomed before him, made of proud red brick, adorned with wide windows that glistened in the afternoon sun. A sense of excitement fluttered in his chest, a feeling that had little to do with the hard-earned freedom from work and everything to do with the building behind him. Taking a deep breath, Samuel began his ascent up the wide steps leading to the main entrance. He watched as older children hurried up ahead of him, clutching their books tightly to their chests. Some stumbled over their own feet, their eagerness getting the better of them. He knew they were heading towards the classrooms inside, the same classrooms where he spent his days learning and dreaming. As he reached the top of the steps, he turned to look at the imposing facade once more. It seemed to glow in the twilight, a beacon of hope in the heart of the bustling city. Push, push. He heard a shove behind him and turned to see a gaggle of children descending the stairs. They came from wealthier families, their shoes polished bright, and their coats free of patches. He saw a flash of disdain in one girl's eyes, but he pretended not to notice. Samuel continued his climb, taking his time as he ascended the stairs. He savored this moment, the moment before the clamor of the classroom swallowed him whole. He adjusted his books and straightened his shoulders, preparing himself for the day ahead. The sound of children's laughter carried on the air, mingling with the distant clanging of the factory bells. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the sidewalk, painting the scene in hues of amber and rose. The big iron gate swung open with a screech, revealing a courtyard bustling with children. Their voices, like the notes of a well-tuned piano, harmonized with the sounds of the city. Samuel stepped through the gate and into the heart of the schoolyard. Turning towards the building, he noted the neatly aligned rows of coats and hats hanging on pegs along the wall. Each piece of clothing marked its owner's place, a silent testament to the hundreds of lives that converged within these four walls. Samuel found his way to his classroom door. He reached out and pushed it open gently, stepping inside. The room was mostly empty, save for a few stragglers putting away their things. He spotted his small wooden desk waiting for him in the second row. There was something comforting about its familiarity, the smooth surface, and the tiny scratches that bore silent witness to countless lessons past. Slowly the room began to fill with returning students. Their voices, hushed but lively, whispered tales of their day outside the classroom. As the last bell chimed, signaling the end of the afternoon break, the children fell silent, turning to face the blackboard at the front of the room. There, standing tall amidst the towering blackboards, was Miss Carter, their teacher. She was stern but kind, her glasses perched low on her nose as she surveyed the room. Her presence commanded respect, and her gentle eyes promised understanding. "Good afternoon, class," she said, her voice as steady and reassuring as the tick-tock of the old clock on the wall. "Settle down, please." With obedient murmurs, the children took their seats. Samuel slid into his desk, carefully opening his book. The scent of aged paper filled his nostrils, a fragrance that spoke of countless stories waiting to be discovered. The room, though simple, was a universe unto itself. The chalkboard at the front stood like a silent sentinel, ready to impart its secrets. The rows of sturdy wooden desks stretched out like a battleground, each holding the dreams and aspirations of its young warrior. And the tall windows, like watchful eyes, looked out onto the world, framing the sky in a constant reminder of the boundless possibilities that lay beyond their classroom walls. A shaft of sunlight piercing through the parted curtains illuminated dust motes dancing in the air, creating a magical aura that set Samuel's imagination soaring. Each ray of light seemed to paint a new story on the worn floorboards, transforming the ordinary into the extraordinary. From his desk, Samuel could see Miss Carter pacing before the blackboard. Her chalk squeaked as it scraped against the rough surface, leaving behind white lines that formed words and numbers and shapes. The faint smell of chalk and ink hung in the air, mingling with the earthy aroma of countless young minds that had sat in these very seats before him. The room, though dimly lit, was filled with a radiance that had nothing to do with the flickering gas lamp hanging from the ceiling. It was the radiance of young minds awakening, of spirits eager to learn, of hearts set on dreams. As Miss Carter turned to face the class, her lips curved into a warm smile. "All right, children," she said, her voice ringing with enthusiasm. New lesson, new adventures. Samuel felt a surge of excitement course through him. He leaned forward, eager to absorb every word, every lesson, every story she had to share. The rhythmic scrape of chalk on slate filled the room as Miss Carter began her lesson. She spoke of faraway lands and historic figures, her words weaving a tapestry of knowledge that Samuel found utterly captivating. The classroom, with its worn furniture and high ceilings, transformed into a portal, transporting Samuel and his classmates to different eras and distant corners of the world. The ticking clock on the wall became the soundtrack to their journey through time and imagination. In his small desk, Samuel diligently copied letters and numbers from the board, his pencil moving with the practiced ease of a young scribe. Beside him, the faint rustle of papers and the murmur of voices created a comforting hum, a melody that was as familiar to him as his own heartbeat. Through the open window, the sounds of the city drifted in, the rumble of passing carriages, the distant cawing of crows, the laughter of children at play. Yet none of these sounds could penetrate the bubble of concentration that Samuel had built around himself. His eyes were fixed on the board, his mind absorbing every detail, every stroke of chalk, every word spoken. For Samuel, this classroom was more than just a place of learning. It was a sanctuary, a refuge from the chaos of the outside world. Within its four walls, he could be anyone, anywhere, so long as he had his books and his pencils. As Miss Carter continued her lesson, Samuel's mind wandered. He pictured the ancient pyramids reaching for the sky, heard the roar of gladiators in the Roman Colosseum, and marveled at the bustling markets of old Cairo. The classroom walls dissolved, giving way to the endless expanse of history, of geography, of literature. In his mind's eye, he saw the very people whose names were etched in stone or lost to the sands of time. The squeak of the chalkboard brought him back to the present. With a start, he realized that he had been daydreaming once again. But this time, he was not scolded. Instead, Miss Carter smiled encouragingly. "Daydreaming is fine, Samuel," she said, her voice gentle. "But remember, there's a time and a place for everything. Now, let's return to our lesson." Samuel nodded, his cheeks flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and admiration. He loved his teacher. He loved her patience, her kindness, and most of all, her ability to ignite his imagination. As the minutes ticked by, Samuel's eyes began to droop. The drone of Miss Carter's voice, though soothing, was a lullaby that his eyelids struggled to keep fighting against. Despite his best efforts, his head began to nod in rhythm with the ticking clock. The ticking grew louder, the words began to blur, and the classroom swam before his eyes. Just as Samuel was about to succumb to sleep, a gentle nudge on his shoulder brought him back to consciousness. Startled, he turned to see a kindly-looking girl from the class smiling at him. "Are you okay, Samuel?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. "You were sleeping." Samuel blushed, realizing that he had been caught. I'm sorry," he stammered, rubbing his sleepy eyes. "I didn't mean to fall asleep." The girl shook her head, her smile widening. "Don't be silly," she said. "It's all right. I've been there before." As Samuel looked around, he saw that several other students were also struggling to stay awake. Miss Carter, ever perceptive, noticed their drooping eyelids and yawns. With a knowing smile, she ended the lesson. "Well, children," she said, "it seems we're all tired. It's time for recess." The children perked up immediately, their faces brightening with excitement. Samuel, shaking off his drowsiness, jumped out of his seat. As the children spilled out into the yard, Samuel stepped out into the open air. The sight that greeted him was both familiar and heartwarming. Before him stretched a large, if somewhat uneven patch of ground, the schoolyard. Here, amidst the tall buildings and the din of the city, the children found their own slice of freedom. In the middle of the yard, a worn leather ball was being kicked around by a group of boys, their shouts and laughter echoing across the space. A cluster of girls stood by the wall, jumping rope and singing a lively tune. Samuel, however, did not join in right away. He stood for a moment, observing the scene before him. The faces of his classmates, their shouts and laughter, the rhythm of their games, it was all a melody that he had grown to cherish. Slowly a smile crept onto his face. He began to move, his feet carrying him towards the playing children. As Samuel ran and laughed, he felt a lightness in his heart that had nothing to do with the fading ache of hunger or the distant haze of smoke. This, he thought, was what it meant to be a child, to find joy in the simplest of things, to make friends and memories that would last a lifetime. The crisp autumn air nipped at his cheeks, making them flush with color. The laughter of children rang out, mingling with the rustling of leaves beneath their feet. The ground, though hard and sometimes uneven, was their playground. Time slipped by unnoticed as Samuel and his classmates reveled in their freedom. They played until the shrill whistle pierced the air, signaling the end of recess. With reluctant goodbyes and promises to meet again, the children filed back. As twilight descended upon the city, Samuel hurried home through the bustling streets, clutching his battered schoolbook close to his chest. By the time he reached home, the sky was turning dark. The buildings loomed over him, their facades casting long, distorted shadows that danced and swayed in the evening breeze. He paused for a moment, taking in the familiar scene before him. Street lamps flickered to life one by one, casting a hazy yellow halo on the cobblestones. The glow painted patches of light on the uneven pavement and glistened on the window panes of the tenement, reflecting the lives unfolding within. Each window was a portal to a different story, a silent witness to the joys and sorrows that played out behind the glass. Taking a deep breath, Samuel continued on, eager to share with his family the stories he'd learned that day. As he climbed the creaking steps towards his apartment, the sounds of the city gradually faded away. The murmur of distant crowds was replaced by the symphony of clanking metal and rumbling carts echoing from the dimly lit workshops below. Each step took him closer to the warmth and familiarity of home. Reaching the 4th floor, he paused outside their apartment door, listening to the sounds that drifted from within. Through the thin wood, he could hear the faint murmur of voices and the comforting clatter of pots and pans. Pushing open the door, he stepped inside. He was greeted by the sights and smells that always welcomed him after a long day. The tenement stairwell, with its chipped paint and worn wooden banisters, had been their home for several years now. Though small and humble, it was filled with the echoes of laughter, dreams and hopes. The air was thick with the aroma of wood smoke and boiled cabbage, mingling with the scent of his mother's lavender perfume. The tenement stairwell opened into a small, cluttered two-room apartment. A single oil lamp swung from the ceiling, casting long shadows that stretched and twisted across the floorboards. The lamplight illuminated the worn furniture and chipped crockery, giving the room a warm, inviting glow. Despite the cramped conditions, there was a sense of comfort and familiarity here, a testament to the strength of the family bond. The coal stove glowed faintly in the corner, casting a soft, flickering light on the worn bricks of the hearth. Above it, a blackened kettle hung from a hook, its handle glinting in the lamplight. On the table beside it, a plate of cabbage sat steaming, its savory scent mingling with the aromas of onions and garlic. The air was thick with the promise of a simple but nourishing meal. His mother stirred a pot on the stove, her hands tired but steady. Her apron was dusted with flour, evidence of the day's baking, and her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, revealing the delicate lines etched on her forehead, a map of a life well lived. Her eyes, however, were bright with warmth and affection, reflecting the love that shone through their modest home. His father sat nearby, boots off, rubbing his sore feet. His overalls were dusted with grime, a testament to a hard day's labor, and his hands were calloused and strong, bearing the marks of honest toil. But the weariness in his stance was overshadowed by the kindness in his eyes, a quiet strength that had anchored their family through the years. The smell of cabbage stew filled the small room, mingling with the aroma of fresh bread and the faint scent of lavender. It was a simple meal, but within these four walls it was a feast. The worn table was set with a checkered cloth and held a collection of mismatched plates and cups. Yet to the family gathered around it, it was a place of comfort and connection. He joined his family at the small table, its surface scarred with the memories of countless meals shared. They bowed their heads briefly, not in prayer, but in gratitude for the simple blessings that filled their lives, for the food that warmed their bellies, the roof overhead, and most importantly for each other. The stew was thin but filling, seasoned with the flavors of their lives, their hardships and their hopes. It may not have been fancy, but in that small tenement room, it tasted like heaven. As Samuel ate, he listened to the quiet murmurs of his family, their voices a comforting melody that played on a constant loop in his life. He cherished these moments, these quiet evenings filled with the warmth of shared meals and the unspoken bond of family. In this tiny haven, surrounded by the scent of cabbage and the glow of lamplight, he found solace and strength. Outside, the city roared with life, but within their humble abode, there was a different kind of magic, the magic of togetherness. The lamp flickered above them, casting soft shadows that danced and swayed in the gentle breeze. Outside, the wind whistled through the cracks in the buildings, but within the room, the lamplight chased away the chill, creating an island of warmth amidst the cold embrace of the city night. The stew bubbled softly on the stove, a gentle lullaby that echoed the rhythm of their lives. The worn tablecloth was a battlefield of stains and spills, each marking a different chapter in their family's story. The silence wasn't awkward, but comfortable, filled with the unspoken understanding that bound them together. In the small room, the shadows seemed to dance gently along the walls, playing hide and seek with the flickering lamplight. They twirled and leaped, creating an imaginary world of wonder and delight. For a moment, the weight of their daily struggles lifted, and they were lost in the magic of the shadows. The air outside the apartment hummed with the city's constant noise, the rumble of carts, the chatter of crowds, the distant wail of sirens. But inside, there was a hush, a sanctuary from the urban chaos. It was a quiet that spoke volumes, a quiet filled with contentment, with shared memories and hopes for the future. The clock on the mantel chimed softly, marking the passage of time with a gentle melody. Its chimes echoed in the small room, a reminder of the fleeting nature of each moment. Samuel listened intently, understanding that every tick-tock was a precious gift to be cherished. As dinner ended, his mother rose from the table, her hands smoothing the wrinkles from the tablecloth. She moved with a quiet grace, a lifetime of experience making the most of every resource etched in her gestures. The tin basin sat patiently on the table, ready to serve as a temporary sink. Water splashed softly as she rinsed the plates and cutlery, each movement practiced and economical. Her song was faint, like the last notes of a violin, but it filled the room with a comforting melody. It wasn't a sad song, but a quiet lullaby that had lulled generations to sleep. Her voice, though worn with age, held a surprising strength. It soared and dipped, painting pictures in the air that danced with emotion. Samuel leaned back in his chair, watching his mother with a mixture of admiration and fondness. In the small oil lamp's glow, her face was etched with the stories of a life fully lived. The lines on her forehead and the gentle curves of her mouth spoke of countless joys and sorrows, triumphs and struggles. His father sighed contentedly, leaning back in his chair. The tension eased from his shoulders, if only for a moment, and a smile touched his lips. It was a rare sight, this ease in his father's demeanor, a quiet contentment that came after a day of toil. His brother sat nearby, his gaze drifting to the shadows on the wall. He was lost in thought, his young mind conjuring worlds from the dancing darkness. To Samuel, it was a familiar sight, this habit of his brother's, and it brought a smile to his face. He pulled out his schoolbook, its worn cover a testament to countless readings. The pages, though dog-eared and faded, still held the magic of storytelling, transporting him to distant lands and introducing him to characters both grand and humble. He opened the book carefully, its musty scent filling his senses. The lamplight glinted off the pages, highlighting the words that held adventure, romance, and knowledge. The room, though small and humble, became a world of its own, as Samuel's voice filled it with tales of bravery and discovery. His mother listened, her hands resting lightly on the table. She didn't need to see the book to know what adventures unfolded between its pages. She could feel the excitement in Samuel's voice, the highs and lows of the story echoing in his tone. His father's eyes drooped slightly, but he managed a small smile. Though the words were foreign to him, he could sense the power of the stories in the way they captivated his son. His brother's head tilted, curiosity overcoming his earlier detachment. The sound of Samuel's voice, so sure and steady, drew him in like a moth to a flame. For a moment, the darkness outside the windows ceased to exist. The peeling wallpaper and the creaky floorboards faded into irrelevance. All that mattered was the world contained within the book, a world where anything was possible. Samuel's voice grew stronger with each page, more confident, more resonant. It was a testament to the power of reading, the ability to transport oneself to different worlds and embody different lives. He finished the passage, his voice trailing off into the silence. His family applauded softly, their voices echoing in the small room. It was a sound of encouragement, of pride, and of love. "Keep reading," his mother said, her voice filled with gentle encouragement. "You'll go farther than we ever could." Her words were a gift, a blessing that carried with it the weight of their hopes and dreams for him. He snuggled deeper into his chair, the book's worn pages cradled in his hands. The lamplight cast long shadows that danced at the edges of his vision, adding a touch of whimsy to the moment. The room was alive with the echoes of laughter, whispers, and dreams. It was a world of its own, shielded from the harsh realities of their day-to-day lives. The glow of the lamp on the table began to fade, its golden hues softening to mimic the setting sun. The shadows lengthened, reaching out like playful fingers to caress the walls. The coal stove in the corner popped softly, sending sparks spiraling upwards like miniature comets streaking across the night sky. The rhythmic crackle was a comforting lullaby, a constant presence in their lives. A jazz tune drifted faintly from the street, carried on the wings of the evening breeze. It was a melody full of life, of passion and of longing, a soundtrack to the sleepless nights of the city. The family remained silent, each lost in their own thoughts, yet connected by the invisible threads of shared experiences and unspoken emotions. He leaned against his brother, seeking comfort in the familiar scent of soap and sawdust that clung to his clothes. His brother's presence was a grounding force, a reminder of the unwavering bonds of family that held. In the heart of New York, where skyscrapers kissed the clouds and the rumble of progress echoed daily, lived a family. Their story is just one in the grand theater of the city. But as twilight deepened into night, their lives intertwined with the rhythm of a city that never truly sleeps. The year was 1926, an era when jazz filled the air and flappers danced the Charleston, when automobiles battled it out with horse-drawn carts, and when dreams were as big as the city itself. For our tale begins not in the boardrooms or the lavish homes of the rich and famous, but in the humble abode of a working-class family. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the city, the father, John, settled into his worn armchair, his gaze fixed on the evening paper. His wife, Mary, hummed softly as she set the table, the aroma of supper lingering in the air. And their two children, Samuel and Elizabeth, with eyes full of wonder, gazed out of their apartment window onto the bustling Broadway. Meanwhile, as the clock tower chimed 6, signaling the start of the evening, the city outside stirred to life. The electric lights, like 1,000 stars fallen to earth, began to twinkle in the gathering dusk. Glowing shop windows displayed not just wares, but dreams. Dresses shimmered, shoes glistened, and even the chocolates in their boxes seemed to sparkle with magic. The streets, cobbled and wet from a recent rain, reflected the gaslight in shimmering puddles. Each lamp post became a pool of gold, dancing with the shadows of passing carriages. Automobiles, those metal monsters of the modern age, rumbled past, their headlights like the eyes of predators cutting through the dark. Behind them, the steady clop of horses' hooves on stone echoed, mingling with the creak of their carts. The sound of horns blared from the depths of the canyons formed by the tall brick buildings. These towering giants watched silently over the city, their upper floors wreathed in darkness, their lower levels alive with activity. From open windows, bursts of laughter and music spilled out, serenading the night. Down below, in the heart of the crowd, couples strolled hand in hand, their shadows stretched and distorted in the smoky haze of brightly lit speakeasies. Inside these hidden dens of revelry, couples swayed to the rhythm of the jazz, their eyes locked in a world of their own. A trumpet wailed, then soared, accompanied by the rhythmic pulse of piano and drums. Outside, the music mingled with the murmur of everyday life, the rumble of delivery trucks, the chatter of newsboys, and the distant wail of a siren. Men in their finest coats lingered near doorways waiting, talking in hushed tones. Women in their flapper dresses, heels clicking on the pavement, hurried by, their beaded bags swinging. The night was a dance of elegance and survival, a waltz of glamour and grit. In the shadowy corners, bootleggers slipped unseen, their footsteps silent on the wet stones. Up in the smoky haze of jazz clubs, glasses clinked and feet tapped. Down in the crowded streets, a newsboy, his face smudged with dirt, called out the latest headlines. his voice hoarse from the day's effort. He folded the paper, tucked it under his arm, and moved on, seeking his next customer. The city held its breath for a moment as a policeman, his whistle hanging at his lips, stepped into the street. His presence brought a semblance of order to the chaos. Street vendors, their faces illuminated by the glow of small braziers, kept fires burning in the chill night. The smell of roasted chestnuts filled the air, chasing away the damp chill. And then there were the children, too poor for bed, who wandered the narrow alleys. Their eyes, wide and innocent, caught the shine of the street lamps, transforming the grimy pavement into a sea of gold. Somewhere in the distance, a trolley rattled down its track, sparks crackling overhead like fireworks. Its bell chimed, the sound echoing into the night, swallowed eventually by the restless hum of the city. Above the din, a new sound rose, the buzz of electric signs. The skyline shimmered with their glow, spelling out names of theaters and touting the latest shows. In those brightly lit playhouses, actors and actresses brought stories to life, their voices mingling with the applause of the crowd. Outside, lines of eager faces, each holding a ticket to a world of make-believe, snaked around the blocks. In the warm glow of a nearby diner, workers from the night shift sipped coffee from chipped mugs. The smell of fried eggs and bread clung to the air, mingling with the steam rising from their drinks. They laughed quietly, shaking off the day's labor, finding solace in the shared fatigue of their blue-collar brotherhood. For a moment, the small, cluttered room was filled with warmth, chasing away the shadows of weariness. But outside, the night was far from over. On the darkened streets, bootleggers slipped into shadowy bars where whispers of secret deals passed between men in hats. This was the era of prohibition, a time when the line between legal and illegal was blurred, and the city was its battleground. Inside, men with slicked-back hair and sharp suits mixed with those whose faces were etched with the hardship of the Depression. The air was thick with cigar smoke and the clinking of ice-filled glasses. Through the grimy window, the red glow spilled onto the sidewalk, illuminating faces that were lost in thought or deep in conversation. In the flickering gaslight, headlines of the latest newsboys' cries could be seen dancing. In the windows, the city held its breath. Slowly, a group of young men strolled past, their voices singing drunkenly. Their camaraderie echoed against the bricks, bouncing back like the laughter of ghosts. Across the street, a dog barked furiously from its hole in the alley, momentarily startling a young woman who hurried by. Her beaded dress swayed as she walked, her eyes fixed on the ground. She clutched her beaded purse tightly, her heels clicking a staccato rhythm on the wet stones. The scent of smoke and frying food hung heavy in the air, a reminder of the countless kitchens where dreams were cooked and hopes were served. On a nearby street corner, a musician raised his violin to his shoulder, drawing a small crowd. His music, a mix of melancholy and joy, echoed in the narrow space between buildings. A few coins clinked into his open hat. He paused briefly, bowing his head in thanks, then continued to play. His eyes were closed, his body swaying slightly to the rhythm of his music. It was a haunting melody, beautiful and sad, a lament for those who had lost their way in the maze of the city. He played of broken dreams and quiet desperation, of love found and lost, of laughter and sorrow. The city listened, if only for a moment, and its weary heartstrings resonated with his tune. As he played, the night deepened, and the city's sounds grew louder. Cars rushed by, their horns blaring. People hurried along the sidewalks, their voices rising in a chorus. The scent of gasoline and exhaust mingled with the perfume of a passing woman, creating an intoxicating aroma unique to this city that never slept. Above him, laundry lines stretched from building to building, fluttering in the night breeze like ghostly banners. A newspaper page fluttered across the street, dancing briefly in the light before settling against a lamp post. It looked like a ghost, a spectre of news from some bygone era. And in the soft glow, it seemed to whisper tales of a different time. The faint chime of a church bell tolled somewhere in the distance, marking the passage of time. Its sound was swallowed by the city's roar, yet it lingered in the ears, a reminder of a world beyond the urban sprawl. In the cacophony of the city, 1,000 stories unfolded. Dreams were spun, deals were struck, hearts were broken, and lives were changed. The night wore on, carrying with it the hopes, fears, and aspirations of millions. As Samuel slept, unaware of the city's nocturnal symphony, the darkness outside his window throbbed with life. The city was a living, breathing entity, its pulse echoing in the rhythm of the streets. It was a place of both beauty and brutality, of promise and despair. It was a city that never truly slept, and its story was written in the stars. The relentless roar of the city echoed through Samuel's small room. The walls vibrated with the rumble of trams and the shouts of street vendors. Outside, the world spun, a dizzying mix of poverty and dreams. But as the city roared outside, Samuel's mind drifted deeper into dreams. In his dream, the noise of the streets softened into music. It was a lullaby sung by the city itself, a tune that spoke of adventures far beyond the grime and grit of his daily life. He walked out of his tenement building and into the bustling streets, where the familiar sounds took on a magical quality. The rattle of carts pulling up outside his window became the rhythm of drums. Each wheel spoke like a timpani, beating out a lively tempo that matched the skip in Samuel's step. The honk of horns turning from the corner below his window became the call of trumpets. The music swelled, filling the air with anticipation. He followed the sound, his heart beating faster with each note. The city itself became a grand orchestra, playing just for him. Shop windows turned into open pages of a storybook. Their reflections shimmered and danced like scattered jewels. The gaslights, usually dim and yellow, blazed with 1,000 colors, painting Samuel's world in hues of gold, sapphire, and ruby. He walked along streets that glowed brighter than ever before. The buildings seemed to lean closer, whispering secrets in hushed tones. The cobblestones beneath his feet were a smooth, polished marble, guiding him on a path of shimmering light. The smell of fresh bread and chocolate filled the air, mingling with the sweet notes of pipe organ music drifting from an unseen source. Windows sparkled like treasures waiting to be claimed, beckoning him closer with promises of untold wonders. He walked past pubs and cafes where patrons sat, not hunched over tables, but laughing, sharing stories and dreams. They looked up as he passed, their faces filled with smiles and recognition. He wasn't just Samuel, the newsboy from the tenement district. In this dream, he was someone else, someone important. He was someone who belonged. This time, Samuel did not only watch the parade of life, he was a part of it. He wasn't just a spectator peering into shop windows or eavesdropping on conversations. This time, he belonged. And in that moment, he knew that even if his dreams seemed distant, even if his reality was harsh, he carried the magic within him. All he had to do was reach out and touch it. He felt the strength of the city coursing through his veins, urging him forward. He wasn't the frail, mistreated boy from the slums anymore. In his dream, he was older, stronger, taller. He walked with confidence, his shoes no longer worn, his coat neatly buttoned, his cap tilted just right. People greeted him with smiles and respect. He wasn't the boy pressed against the edges of the crowd, trying to be invisible. He was part of the city's rhythm, its pulse, its very essence. He wasn't Samuel, the newsboy. In his dream, he was Samuel, the dreamer. And in that dream, anything was possible. He wasn't destined for the dark, dank basement. He would work with books instead of machines. He imagined shelves filled with stories from every land, with tales of daring adventure and faraway lands. He imagined himself writing one of those stories someday, words that could transport readers to other worlds, words that could make the impossible come alive. He thought, words are stronger than steel. They can build worlds no machine could forge. He wandered into a grand library, its windows streaming in golden light. Sunlight slanted through the glass, illuminating swirling dust motes that danced in the silent air. Inside, rows upon rows of books rose higher than he could see, their spines a rich tapestry of leather and gold. Their titles whispered promises of adventure, history, and magic. The air was thick with the scent of paper and ink, of aged wisdom and untold stories. Light streamed down through tall windows, golden and soft, setting the dust motes dancing in the vast hall. He ran his fingers along a shelf, surprised by the smooth texture of the wood. A book, its cover smooth beneath his touch, leaned slightly as if waiting for him to open it. When he did, the pages glowed with an inner light, and Samuel gasped. Stories poured out, a waterfall of words cascading around him, wrapping him in their embrace. He saw brave knights and mystical creatures, explorers charting unknown seas, and lovers whispering under ancient trees. He saw kings and queens, their crowns gleaming, and commoners whose lives were filled with laughter and light. He saw heroes who rose from nothing, just like him, who dared to dream and dared to reach for the stars. Then the dream carried him higher, lifting him from the shelves to windows that looked out onto the city. The view was breathtaking, the rooftops spread out like a patchwork quilt, stitched together with winding streets and dotted with chimneys, puffing lazy clouds of smoke. In the distance, hills rose like sleeping giants, their peaks brushing the clouds. Beyond the hills, Samuel could just make out the glimmer of the sea, a constant reminder of the world's vastness and his own small place within it. But as he gazed at the horizon, the buildings around him began to shift and change. Walls dissolved to reveal cozy rooms bathed in lamplight. He saw families gathered around tables laden with food, their faces lit by flickering candles. He heard the murmur of voices, the clink of glasses, and the soft strum of a guitar. He dreamed of a home larger than 2 rooms. He dreamed of windows that opened to wide skies, not just brick walls. He dreamed of a table filled with food, bread, fruit, meat, and sweets. He dreamed of his family sitting around it, smiling and strong. His mother's hands were no longer red from scrubbing. His father's back stood straight, free of pain. His brother laughed without exhaustion in his eyes. The apartment of his dream glowed with warmth and joy, filled with the comforting aroma of baking bread and the sweet scent of honeysuckle wafting in from the nearby park. Hope filled the walls instead of smoke. Laughter replaced the sound of creaking floors, and the murmur of voices replaced the silence of empty rooms. In this dream, Samuel's world had room for peace. He wasn't just Samuel, the newsboy who slept in a cramped room with his 2 brothers. In his dream, he was Samuel, the student with a bright future ahead of him. He wasn't destined for the grime and danger of the factory floor. He would become a teacher, sharing stories and helping others learn. He saw himself at the front of a classroom, his students leaning forward, eager to hear his words. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating rows of desks and chairs. The air buzzed with the energy of young minds, ready to explore the world. He read aloud from a well-worn book, his voice echoing with excitement. Children listened, their faces a mix of wonder and delight. Pencils scratched on paper as they copied words and phrases, committing them to memory. He watched them, his heart swelling with pride. He saw himself in their eager faces, in their curious eyes, and he knew he could make a difference. He could guide them, inspire them, open their minds to the endless possibilities that lay ahead. The classroom was more than just a room. It was a place of growth, a space where dreams were nurtured and futures were shaped. He wasn't Samuel, the exploited child laborer. In his dream, he was Samuel, the writer, his name shining brightly on the cover of a book. He saw readers, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of lamps, their eyes sparkling with excitement. They turned the pages, their lips moving as they whispered the words to themselves. Some smiled, some cried, some dreamed. He imagined his words carrying readers away to far-off lands, igniting their imaginations and stirring their souls. He envisioned booksellers hawking his stories to eager customers, their voices echoing through bustling marketplaces and quiet reading rooms. He dreamed of book reviews praising his work, of critics hailing him as a master storyteller. His words reached far beyond the tenement walls, weaving their way into the hearts and minds of people from all walks of life. He wasn't just Samuel, the newsboy from the slums. In his dream, he was Samuel, the traveler. He stood at the edge of the continent, the wind whipping through his hair, the tang of salt spray on his lips. Before him, a mighty ship with billowing sails awaited. It was his ticket to adventure, to exploration, to discovery. The crew bustled about their tasks, their voices ringing with anticipation. As the ship cast off its moorings and glided into the boundless expanse of the ocean, Samuel knew there was no turning back. The rhythmic lull of the waves became his lullaby, the steady creak of the ship, his constant companion. The vast canvas of the sky above and the endless expanse of the sea around held endless promise. Every horizon beckoned with a new tale, every port offered a chance to learn and grow. Soon the coastline faded into the distance, replaced by the endless expanse of rolling waves. The ship cut through the water, leaving Samuel's worries and woes far behind. With each passing day, he felt himself shedding the weight of his old life, embracing the boundless opportunities that lay ahead. He wasn't Samuel, the victim of circumstance. In his dream, he was Samuel, the adventurer, the explorer, the seeker of knowledge and understanding. The train sped through the tunnel, its whistle echoing in the darkness. Then, just as suddenly, it burst out into the sunshine, emerging into a world transformed. Samuel gasped as he saw rolling hills, lush green meadows, and sparkling rivers winding through them. The world outside the window was a vibrant tapestry of color and movement. The rhythmic chugging of the engine mingled with the sweet song of birds, creating a melody that soothed his soul. As the train raced over bridges and through tunnels, he marveled at the intricate network of tracks that connected this wonderland. Each stop brought new faces, new stories, and new experiences. With every passing mile, Samuel felt himself growing, expanding his understanding of the world and his place in it. He wasn't Samuel, the chained worker. In his dream, he was Samuel, the pilot. He stood beside a giant silver bird, its wings outstretched as if ready to take flight at any moment. The engine purred softly, a gentle rumble that vibrated through Samuel's bones. As he climbed the ladder to the cockpit, he felt a sense of awe and excitement. Above him, the sky beckoned, promising endless adventure. With a final flourish, Samuel settled into his seat. He gripped the controls, feeling their coolness beneath his fingertips. Then, with a surge of power and a rush of wind, the plane lifted off the ground. As it soared higher and higher, Samuel's heart soared with it. He wasn't Samuel, the powerless boy. In morning light, thin and grey, crept through the gaps in the curtains. Samuel stirred awake. Dreams, still clinging to him, pulling him back to fields of green and days of sun. For a moment, the warmth of hope lingered, chasing away the chill of the room. But soon the weight of reality pressed close again, seeping in through cracks in the walls, seeping in through the worn fabric of his dreams. The apartment smelled faintly of coal and boiled cabbage. His mother was already up, bent over the basin by the window. Her back was stiff with weariness, her shoulders slumped under an unseen weight. Her hands were raw, red from the cold water, wringing out clothes that smelled of stale sweat and harder work than any child should witness. Clothes dripped onto the wooden floor, leaving dark spots on the wood. His father sat at the table, lacing his boots, his face half hidden in the shadows. His face looked older than yesterday, lines etched deeper by the strain of the world outside. Samuel's brother coughed, a harsh rattling sound that echoed in the small room. He buttoned his worn coat without looking back. He never spoke until he was out the door, never showed his face except to sleep. The air in the apartment was heavy, weighed down with fatigue. Breakfast was thin again, just bread and weak tea. Samuel spread the thin layer of butter over his slice, chewed slowly, wishing for more. But no one complained. Silence was their grace. Outside, the factory whistle shrieked, a long-drawn cry that tore through the morning stillness. It called his father and brother back into its iron jaws, back to the place that swallowed their days and left only shadows in return. They left with quick steps, shoulders already bent, walking the hard walk of men who owed their souls to the machines. Samuel watched them disappear down the street, swallowed by the greyness of the day and the looming presence of the factory. Then he heard his mother sigh, a long, weary sound that spoke of nights too long and dreams too brief. She kissed his forehead before returning to her work, her touch lingering a moment longer than needed, as if seeking solace in the simple act of human contact. He carried his schoolbook, but the weight felt heavier today, pressing down on his shoulders like a stone lodged in his small frame. The street seemed colder, harsher than yesterday, the wind biting at his exposed skin. Vendors shouted, horns blared, but there was no joy in the noise, only the discordant clamor of a city struggling to find its rhythm. The factory smoke hung lower today, blackening the sky, choking the light before it could reach the ground. Children hurried to school, some laughing, some weary, all carrying burdens that tugged at their small frames. Samuel walked among them quietly, his stomach still empty, his steps echoing the emptiness within. At school, the desks felt harder, the lessons longer, the silence in between more deafening. The chalk squeaked against the board, grating in his ears, each sound echoing the turmoil in his gut. He tried to focus on the words in his book, tried to make sense of fractions and equations, but hunger gnawed at him relentlessly, a constant companion on his path to ruin. At recess, children unwrapped lunches filled with apples and sandwiches, their laughter mingling with the aroma of food. Samuel sat with his single piece of bread, watching other children play. The boy who once shared an apple with him was absent today, and Samuel felt the loneliness of hunger more sharply than before. Back in class, his pencil snapped mid-sentence. He froze, knowing he had no spare. He looked around furtively, hoping no one had noticed. The teacher saw and quietly gave him another. He whispered a thank you, cheeks burning with shame. By the time the final bell rang, the sky had turned grey. He walked home slowly, his book clutched tight to his chest. The streets were wet with melted snow, soaking his shoes and sealing the dampness within his home. His breath hung in the cold air like smoke, a fleeting ghost against the backdrop of a dying day. When he reached home, the apartment was dim, lit only by the weak glow of the oil lamp. His mother sat silently at the table, hands still in the water, her face illuminated by the flickering light. Her shoulders slumped with exhaustion, her movements languid, as if drained of energy and hope. He placed his book gently on the table beside her. The coal stove flickered weakly in the corner, offering little heat against the encroaching cold. Their dinner that night was thinner than ever. The stew was more water than food, yet they ate quietly, grateful for something warm in their empty bellies. His father returned late, his face grey with soot, his clothes reeking of the factory. He coughed harshly, the sound rattling in his chest, like a death rattle in a tomb. Samuel's brother followed, limping from a twisted ankle. He tried to hide the pain, but Samuel could see it in the way he favored his foot, in the wincing of his young face. Silence filled the room as the family ate. Only the sound of spoons against bowls broke the quiet. The lamp flickered low, shadows stretching long and distorted on the walls. Samuel looked at his family, their faces worn and tired, etched with the harsh lines of hardship. Their eyes, however, still held a flicker of determination, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity. His dreams from the night before, dreams of a brighter, kinder world, seemed distant and unattainable. Yet in the depths of his despair, he held them close, nurturing them like a precious commodity. Dreams were the only thing that hardship could not steal. As the evening deepened, Samuel snuggled into his threadbare blanket, seeking comfort in its familiar texture. The weight of the world pressed down on him, threatening to crush his meager hopes. But within that darkness, he found a strange kind of peace. He whispered to himself, "One day it will be different." The words were soft, yet strong in his heart, a mantra against the relentless rhythm of their daily struggle. His mother touched his shoulder gently, as if sensing his inner turmoil. She gave him a small smile, tired but full of love, her touch and smile chasing away the shadows that threatened to consume him. Outside, the city roared on, indifferent to the quiet heroism played out in the small apartment. The coal stove popped, filling the silence with a spark, mirroring the flame of hope that refused to be extinguished in Samuel's heart. And as the night settled heavy over the apartment, he closed his eyes, ready to dream again, even in hardship, dreaming of a better tomorrow. Night had returned to the city once more. The rumble of the day had faded, the shouts of vendors and the clanging of streetcars had softened into the distance. Inside the small apartment, Samuel lay beneath his blanket. He was warm, cozy, and drowsy. His eyelids grew heavy as the night deepened. Outside the window, a dog barked, then fell silent. The coal stove glowed faintly in the corner, its warmth seeping into the room. Its fiery glow danced in Samuel's half-closed eyes. Soon it too would fade into the darkness. On the small wooden table beside his bed, an oil lamp flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls. A gentle breeze from the window stirred the curtains, creating ripples of light and dark across the ceiling. Each flicker, each gust, a silent lullaby. His family breathed quietly around him. His sister Miriam, her face pale in the lamplight, slept soundly, her head resting on his brother David's shoulder. Their parents, Abraham and Sarah, their faces lined with the day's struggles, were lost in the depths of rest. In this small room, there was a symphony of soft snores, a melody of tired breaths. For the moment, peace reigned. It was a fragile thing, easily disturbed, yet in this place it was cherished, nurtured. Samuel felt the day's struggles still clinging to their bodies, the weariness of their steps, the ache in their backs, the hunger that gnawed at their empty stomachs. But in this moment, all those hardships seemed distant. Here, wrapped in the warmth of their shared existence, Samuel knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges. The whistles of factory machines would pierce the morning, the laundry would pile up, the streets would roar with hunger and the relentless search for work. Yet right now, under the dim glow of their oil lamp, there was only the comforting rhythm of their breathing, the silent testament to their survival. Samuel squeezed his eyes shut, allowing the darkness to envelop him. His mind wandered, seeking solace in the past. Memories flickered like fireflies in the twilight of day. He remembered the laughter at school, the echo of children's voices ringing through the halls. He remembered the stories he read aloud to his siblings, the words painting pictures in their wide, eager eyes. He remembered the roar of the factory where his father worked, the rhythmic clang of machinery, a relentless heartbeat of industry. He remembered the starry nights lying on the roof with his brother, pointing to constellations unknown, making wishes upon falling stars. He remembered his dreams. Dreams of books, their pages whispering secrets, dreams of distant lands, their names foreign yet inviting, dreams of stars, twinkling promises in the vast canvas of night. The city had shown him its harsh side today, the biting wind of winter, the indifferent stare of those who had little to spare. Yet tonight, as he drifted into sleep, he thought of its other face, the face of promise. He thought of the gaslights that turned night into day, the towering buildings that scraped the sky, the endless stream of people, each with their own story, their own dreams. New York was a place of contrasts, of grit and glamour, of struggle and aspiration. And within these walls, Samuel held both those images, the harsh and the hopeful, side by side. Samuel knew that life would not be kind. He saw the hunger in the eyes of children on the street, the desperation in his mother's voice when she bargained for food at the market. He heard the whispers of those who doubted his father's strength, who said his arm was too shaky to turn a machine's lever. He understood the weight of their expectations, the silent pressure to succeed. But even in the darkest moments, he held on to hope. Every hardship he faced, every challenge he conquered made him stronger. Every dream he nurtured, every goal he set, gave him direction. With each passing day, he learned something new, whether it was a word in a book, a phrase in a song, or the way to fix a leaky pipe. These were tools, weapons in the battle of life. Samuel might have been just 10 years old, but he knew that the world was not kind, especially not to those who looked like him, who came from places far away, who spoke with different tongues and followed different customs. But he also knew that he was not alone. He had his family, their love a shield against the world's indifference. Their sacrifices were his strength, their dreams were his guide. As he drifted off to sleep, Samuel whispered to himself, "One day I will change this." His words were soft, fragile things, lost in the dim oil lamplight. But in his heart, they echoed like a promise. The city outside never stopped moving. Lights shimmered, car horns blared, footsteps echoed, voices mingled in a ceaseless melody of urban life. But inside the small apartment, stillness reigned. It was a sanctuary of peace amidst the chaos, a haven of rest in the heart of a restless city. Samuel's breath was soft and even, rising and falling with the gentle rhythm of his sleeping body. His eyelids fluttered, lost in dreams that shifted and changed like the clouds in a summer sky. The faint scent of coal smoke mingled with the aroma of stale bread, creating a strange comfort, a smell of home. The sound of the city seeped through the window, a constant hum, a reminder of the world beyond the walls. Yet in this small, cramped room, there was a different rhythm. The rhythm of breathing, the rhythm of sleep, the rhythm of survival, the rhythm of love. Each inhale and exhale was a silent prayer, a plea for health, for strength, for hope. Every slumbering form in the room breathed to that tune, their bodies in sync with the needs of the day. Samuel dreamt of books, their pages whispering tales of adventure, of bravery, of lives lived in worlds far removed from his own. He dreamt of faraway lands, their names exotic, their landscapes painted in colors he had never seen, their people speaking in languages that sounded like music. In his dreams, he soared above the rooftops of New York, his spirit freed from the confines of poverty, from the limitations of age. He dreamt of being an explorer, discovering lost cities and forgotten treasures. He dreamt of becoming a writer, weaving words into worlds that captured the hearts of readers. He dreamt of reaching for the stars, not just twinkling points of light in the night sky, but actual goals to be attained, milestones on a path to greatness. The city was a vast ocean, sometimes calm, sometimes stormy, but always full of possibilities. Samuel swam in its depths, diving into the hidden corners where magic resided. He chased after dreams that shimmered like bubbles on the surface, knowing that some might pop, but others might just float all the way to shore. In the depths of his dreams, Samuel encountered giants. Some tried to hold him back, reminding him of his small size, his limited means, his young age. Others challenged him, urging him to prove himself, to defy expectations, to rewrite his story. And Samuel, armed with the weapons of curiosity and courage, faced them all. He woke to the faint strains of a distant violin, a melancholic melody that seemed to echo the city's blues. Outside, life was stirring, preparing to greet the dawn. But for now, Samuel basked in the afterglow of dreams, carrying the echoes of laughter, the whispers of hope, and the boundless expanse of possibility within him. As the first sliver of sunlight peeked over the horizon, Samuel's dreams carried him once again. This time, he dreamed not of escape, but of strength. Strength to endure, strength to change, strength to rise higher than the smoke and shadows that threatened to engulf him. In his dream, his family stood tall beside him. Their hands were no longer weary, their faces no longer lined with hunger. Together they walked toward a brighter horizon. The sun shone down on them, casting long shadows behind them as they strode forward. The city stretched before them, no longer harsh. Its lights were gentle, welcoming, alive with promise. Samuel smiled in his sleep, his lips curled with quiet determination. And when he finally awoke, the city still bustled outside, but within him he carried tomorrow. It was in every word he learned, every story he dreamed, every step he took on the city's streets. Even hardship could not erase it. Even hunger could not silence it. Hope was his inheritance, fragile but unbroken. Hope was his gift to the future. The night deepened, stars faint above the city haze. The apartment exhaled with the sound of sleep. Time seemed to pause, holding the family in its arms. For now, the world outside did not matter. For now, only peace remained. Samuel drifted deeper into rest, his dreams and his reality blending softly together. The boy of 1920 slept, carrying the promise of tomorrow. And with him, the city whispered, "The future begins here."